It's funny. We spend all this time worrying about someone hacking our bank accounts or,
Yeah.
stealing our credit card info. But um, what about the things we rely on every single day?
Right, yeah.
Things like electricity and running water, gas for our cars. Turns out
Yeah,
that stuff's vulnerable too.
absolutely.
So we're diving into the world of OT, operational technology.
Hmm.
Um, and uh, basically, these are the systems that are running all of our critical infrastructure.
Yeah.
And as it turns out, it's a prime target for hackers.
It is. It is. We always used to think about OT as like this air-gapped, separate world, right? Hidden away from the internet, safe and sound.
Right.
But the reality is everything is becoming so interconnected
Yeah.
that those lines are really blurring. And suddenly things like power grids, water treatment plants, they're exposed in ways that they just never were before. And the stakes are much higher than a stolen credit card number.
Yeah, you're sure.
That's for sure.
So that's kind of scary. I'm like already rethinking my smart home setup. So to get a handle on all this, we're going deep on 5 real-world cyber attacks.
Right?
Not just what happened, but the how and the why.
Right.
Like the stuff that'll make you go, wait, they got in how.
Exactly. And more importantly, I think, what we can all learn from these events, because these attacks aren't just about technology, right?
Right.
They're about human choices and security gaps and really just this constant cat and mouse game between those trying to protect our systems and those that are trying to exploit them.
Right.
It's fascinating, really.
Right. Let's get into it.
Yeah.
Let's start with a big one, the Colonial Pipeline attack from back in 2021. I remember I was so freaked out when I couldn't get gas.
Yeah, it was a big deal. That attack really showed just how vulnerable this infrastructure is, And it all started with, believe it or not, a single compromised VPN password.
So somebody just guessed a password and it was game over. Like, is that really all it took?
Well, it wasn't quite that simple. You see, while it was a weak password to begin with, they also didn't have multi-factor authentication in place.
Okay.
So it's like, leaving your front door unlocked A&G, propping it open with a welcome mat at the same time.
Oh, wow. Right.
But here's the really interesting part. The hackers, they weren't actually after the pipeline itself, at least not directly.
Okay.
They were after the billing system.
I don't get it. Why go after billing when you could just shut the whole thing down?
Well, you see, a lot of these hackers are motivated primarily by money,
Okay.
not necessarily chaos.
Right.
So by targeting the billing system, they knew they could cripple Colonial Pipeline's operations, and they could force them to pay a hefty ransom to regain control.
So it's like they held their operations hostage.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it.
Right.
And it highlights a very, very crucial point. IT and OT are no longer separate entities.
Yeah.
What happens on the IT side, like in this case with the billing system, can have this devastating ripple effect.
Right.
On the OT side, bringing these critical infrastructure operations to, a grinding halt.
Why? It's like even if your house has like top-notch security, somebody could still cause a blackout in your neighborhood and
Right.
you'd be plunged into darkness.
That's right. You're vulnerable.
Yeah. Okay. All right. That's unsettling.
Yeah.
All right. Let's move on to our next case. This one takes us to the Oldsmar water treatment plant. This was in 2021.
Right.
And this one's like straight out of a nightmare. Hackers trying to poison the water supply.
Yeah, this one was very scary. It was terrifyingly close to being a major disaster.
Wow.
The attackers, they exploited a really common vulnerability, remote access software.
Okay.
And in this case, they used TeamViewer.
TeamViewer.
Yeah.
Like the thing that anybody can download.
Exactly.
That's how they got into a water treatment plant.
Well, it's a tool designed to allow remote control of computers. And, it's essential for a lot of businesses.
Yeah.
It's a double-edged sword.
Yeah.
Because if it's not properly secured, with strong passwords and multi-factor authentication and strict access controls, it's basically an open door.
So you're saying like if you're not using a VPN, forget it.
Well, a VPN is certainly part of it, but you need to have all those other things in place. And in the case of Oldsmar, the attackers, they were able to increase the level of sodium hydroxide in the water.
Hold on, sodium hydroxide, isn't that lye?
Yes, that's right.
The stuff that like burns your skin off? They were going to poison it down with that.
Yeah. It's really scary to think about. That's right. Lye, it can be incredibly dangerous. And in this case, they were trying to introduce it into the water supply, which could have had really, really terrible consequences.
So how was this even stopped?
Thankfully, a plant operator noticed the change in real time and was able to reverse it right away.
Wow, so this time it was like a single person that saved the day.
In a way, yeah, it really shows how important the human element is in all of this. You can have the best technology, the best defenses, but you need people who are trained to spot those anomalies and react quickly to prevent an actual disaster.
Right, because technology can only take you so far.
Exactly.
Okay, makes sense. All right, so speaking of different kinds of attacks, our next case deals with something a little less dramatic than potential mass poisoning, but, still very disruptive.
Wait, so let's talk about the 2020 cyber attack on a major U.S. maritime transportation facility.
Okay, so instead of gas shortages, now we're talking about like cargo ships being stuck at sea, like that global supply chain nightmare that we're all kind of getting used to.
That's right. And this attack, they used ransomware. Essentially, what that means is they encrypt these critical files and hold them hostage until the victim pays a ransom.
So it's like digital kidnapping for your computer files.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. And in this case, this ransomware, it was able to cripple both the IT systems A&D, some of the OT systems that were responsible for cargo handling and vessel movement. So, imagine a major port, everything grinds to a halt. Oh, wow.
Ships can't load, they can't unload for over a day.
Wow. Okay. So I'm seeing a pattern here, right?
Yeah.
Like, we're not just talking about some theoretical threats anymore.
Right.
This is having a real world, impact on all of us.
Absolutely.
Hmm.
These hackers, they understand that disruptions to critical infrastructure, like a major port, they can have a huge economic impact.
Right.
They know that companies are often willing to pay big ransoms to avoid those financial losses and, frankly, the reputational damage that comes with this kind of prolonged downtime.
So it's almost like a business calculation for them.
It is. Absolutely it is.
Like, what's going to get us the biggest payout with what they probably see as the easiest target?
It's a sad reality.
So speaking of targets, case study number 4 brings us to a Texas water utility. This is back in 2019.
Right.
This one gives me the creeps because it wasn't about immediate damage. It was the potential for damage.
Yeah.
They were lying in wait inside the
Yeah.
system. They were. And you're right to be concerned about that. This
Okay.
case is a perfect example of just how insidious some of these attacks can be. And once again, they gained access through weak remote access credentials.
Seriously. Again.
I know. It's a common problem.
It's like they all went to the same hacker school and skipped the class on how to do something else.
You would think they'd try a little harder, but
Yeah.
it seems to be working for them.
Right.
But here's the really unsettling part about this one.
Okay.
Once they got in, they weren't actively trying to cause any damage, at least not right away.
Okay.
They planted this piece of malware that essentially gave them the ability to manipulate those systems at a later date, whenever they chose.
So they were just hanging out waiting for the right time to strike.
Yeah, pretty much.
That's creepy.
Mm-hmm.
It's like knowing that somebody picked your back door lock, but they haven't actually broken into your house yet, but you know that they could at any moment.
Exactly. And, sometimes that not knowing is almost worse than if they had just taken something because you're just, waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Totally.
Yeah.
It makes me think about that old saying, prevention is better than a cure. Like, how do you even begin to protect yourself against something like that?
Right. Well, this case really highlights how important it is not just to prevent breaches, but to detect and respond to threats once they've already made it past those defenses.
Right.
In this particular case, they were caught before they could do any harm,
Oh, good.
but it was a very close call.
Okay, that's a little too close for comfort.
Yeah.
Speaking of close calls, our final case brings us back to the world of water treatment. This time, San Francisco, 2021. I don't know, it seems like water facilities are becoming a really popular target.
It's a worrying trend.
Yeah.
And this particular attack, it's especially troubling because it shows a real shift in tactics.
Okay.
It wasn't just about disrupting operations anymore. They were trying to cause real lasting damage.
So instead of messing with the water treatment itself, they were targeting the system software, trying to break it.
That's right. They were trying to delete critical software from the system,
Oh, wow.
which could have had devastating consequences. Imagine wiping your computer clean and then trying to run this complex industrial process on it.
Yeah.
That's essentially what we're talking about.
Okay. That's a whole other level of scary.
Yeah, it is.
So after hearing about all of these attacks, right, like pipelines and ports and water treatment plants, I mean, it feels like everything's vulnerable. Are there any common threads, like any key takeaways that we can use to, protect ourselves and the systems that we rely on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. If we look at these 5 cases, there are 3 really, really big vulnerabilities that stand out. First, we've got that persistent problem of weak remote access security. We saw it in Oldsmar. We saw those weak credentials in Texas, San Francisco. It doesn't matter if we're talking about TeamViewer or VPNs or any other tools. Without strong passwords, multi-factor authentication, strict access controls, it's like leaving the front door wide open.
Yeah, it's like leaving a key under the mat and acting surprised when someone uses it.
Exactly. The second thing is that we have this growing challenge of IT-OT convergence. Remember the Colonial Pipeline attack?
Yeah.
That was a breach on the IT side,
Mhm.
targeting their billing system, but it crippled the entire pipeline operation.
Right.
And as these systems get even more interconnected, this is just going to get worse.
So it's not enough to just secure the control room. You've got to secure a whole network.
The whole thing.
Yeah. Okay.
And then finally, and this is a big one, we have the critical importance of real-time detection and response. Remember back to that Oldsmar attack?
Yeah.
That could have been a disaster if that plant operator hadn't been paying attention. So we need robust monitoring systems, something to flag suspicious activity.
So it's like having a security system and indeed someone watching the security camera.
Yes, exactly. You need it all.
Okay.
And it's not just about critical infrastructure either, right? It's about protecting ourselves. Everybody listening, be aware of phishing scams, use strong and unique passwords, enable multi-factor authentication everywhere you can.
It's a lot to think about.
It is.
But, knowledge is power. Right.
Absolutely.
The more we understand about these threats, the better we can protect ourselves, protect the things that we use every day.
Exactly. It's a shared responsibility, right?
Mhm.
We all have a role to play here.
Well said. Well, this has been an eye-opening deep dive. I'll be sleeping with one eye open tonight.
Well, at least now you know what to watch out for.
I do. I really do. Thanks for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you.
Stay safe out there, everyone.